Okay, guys. I know you're probably sick of me talking about star-crossed lovers, but I'm just worried that the first video was not that clear. So I'm just going to make this second video to just try and explain it a little bit better. But also, essentially the script of this video is in a Google Docs below, so you can just read through that if you don't want to sit through another video. Okay? So, let's start. We've been talking about the narrative archetype of star-crossed lovers. It's a tragic arc of storytelling where the protagonists fall in love against all odds, then horribly die in a futile effort against fate to stay together. Shakespearean tragedies are often quite bleak and dark in this very manner, and Romeo and Juliet is merely one of many, many strings of bleak and dark tragedies by Shakespeare. Shakespeare's conception of the star-crossed lovers has become a narrative archetype, and it is one that we see very frequently in the stories of our modern times. But in order for something to be archetypal, there needs to be a repetition of certain narrative elements. Because if the nature of the archetype is not really easily recognizable, is it really an archetype? So then, what are some of the recognizable narrative elements we see in the narrative archetype of star-crossed lovers tragedies? Well, first we need a pair of lovers. Typically, the lovers will be young, beautiful, and often naive. Because what better way to maximize the dreadful feeling of tragedy than to have young, beautiful characters die untimely deaths? Romeo and Juliet are both young, beautiful, and incredibly hopeful in their life's outlook. Romeo and Juliet spend their entire lives observing and partaking in the Montague Capulet family feud, but they believe that their marriage could simply make it all go away. Which brings us to our second recognizable story element of the narrative archetype: obstacles of love. The Montague versus Capulet family feud isn't merely an excuse to sprinkle in sword fights and violence into the tragic play. It serves primarily as the obstacle that stands between our two ill-fated lovers. But there is good news for the naive couples and star-crossed lovers. These obstacles of love are most often things that the lovers are able to overcome. However, it is the act of overcoming the obstacle that typically sentences them to death by an unseen force. Now, the unseen force that we're talking about is not midichlorians, although Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala were great examples of star-crossed lovers in space, but the unforeseen force that sentences our lovers to death here is fate. Fate is an essential character in Romeo and Juliet, and while it does not have any speaking parts, it is clearly visible and referred to quite often in the play itself. There are philosophies like fatalism or predeterminism that state the events of history and one's life have already been set by some force, be it God or fate, and that the idea of free will, meaning your ability to change your life, is merely an illusion. Horoscopes and fortune cookies are prime examples of this idea of fate setting up your future. And in Shakespeare plays, we get to see fate as something that has intentions and will. Fate is what punishes the young lovers. And now, to play the devil's advocate here, fate does have a pretty good reason to punish the young lovers. Just picture this. Imagine yourself as the unseen puppeteer of humankind. You go about your mystical puppeteering day, making sure that every puppet has a place and purpose in your grand schemes. All of a sudden, you notice a pair of young, insolent puppets making their own purpose and their own adorable little love story. Not only does this throw off your whole puppet story, but being the puppeteer that can't control their puppets is incredibly embarrassing. So, in the end, the tragedy of star-crossed lovers lies not in the fact that their family and society disapproves of their forbidden love, but in the fact that fate itself has condemned them to death for the very reason that brought them together in the first place: their love. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense to you guys. Let me know if you have any questions about it, but we're going to be starting our project soon, so hopefully this gives you a really good idea of what the concepts are so that you can actually start on your assignments on a good foundation. Thanks for listening, guys.